The morning sun filtered through my home office window as I adjusted the lighting on a series of product photographs for a local furniture company. Being a freelance photographer had its perks: flexible hours, creative control, and the ability to work from my quiet suburban home in Riverside Heights. I bought this modest ranch-style house 6 years ago specifically because it had no homeowners association. After dealing with petty rules and power-hungry board members in my previous neighborhood, I'd made sure my real estate agent understood that was non-negotiable. The house had belonged to an elderly couple, the Hendersons, who'd raised 3 children here over 30 years. The sale was straightforward, the title was clean, and the neighborhood was peaceful. Tree-lined streets, friendly waves from neighbors, kids riding bikes until the streetlights came on. It was exactly what I'd wanted after my divorce: simplicity without complications. I was reviewing photos on my computer when aggressive pounding shattered the quiet Tuesday morning. Not knocking, pounding. The kind that makes your heart jump and your mind race through worst-case scenarios. I saved my work and walked to the front door, already irritated. Through the frosted glass, I could see a uniformed figure, but something about the silhouette seemed off. Too rigid, too theatrical, like someone playing a part rather than doing a job. I opened the door to find a postal carrier practically shoving a thick manila envelope at me. His face was flushed, his movements rushed. "Certified letter," he said, thrusting a clipboard forward. "Sign here." I signed, took the envelope, and watched him sprint back to his truck like he was escaping a crime scene. That should have been my first warning. The envelope was heavy, covered in red stamps screaming "Urgent Legal Notice" across the front. I carried it back to my office, set it beside my coffee mug, and opened it with the letter opener my ex-wife had given me as a joke. The irony wasn't lost on me as I pulled out the contents. Inside was a lawsuit. An actual, honest-to-God lawsuit complete with legal letterhead, case numbers, and 15 pages of accusations that made my blood pressure spike with every paragraph. According to the documents, I was being sued by the Riverside Heights Homeowners Association Committee for flagrant violations of community covenants. They claimed I'd trespassed on common area property by planting rose bushes in what they called HOA-designated green space. They accused me of installing surveillance cameras without board approval. They said I'd painted my front door burgundy without submitting a color application for review. And they wanted $50,000 in damages, plus legal fees, plus an injunction forcing me to remove everything I'd allegedly done wrong. I read it twice, each reading making less sense than the last. I sat at my dining room table, spreading out every document from my home purchase. The deed, the title insurance, the closing statement, the property survey, everything. I'd specifically chosen this neighborhood because it had no homeowners association. I'd asked my real estate agent 3 times to confirm it. I'd read every single page before signing. There was no mention of any HOA anywhere. Not in the deed restrictions, not in the title commitment, not even in the neighborhood disclosure forms. Either someone had made a catastrophic administrative error, or this lawsuit was completely fraudulent. The signature at the bottom of the complaint read, "Vanessa Hartley, President." The lettering looked too perfect, too uniform, like it had been printed rather than signed. In my line of work, I'd learned to notice details most people missed. A badly composed photograph can ruin an entire campaign. A fake signature can ruin a lawsuit. I was still examining the documents when my doorbell rang. I checked my phone's camera feed first, a habit I'd developed after installing a security system following a rash of package thefts last year. A woman stood on my porch, mid-50s, wearing a sharp navy blazer and carrying a leather portfolio. She had the kind of severe haircut that screamed authority and wore a large badge clipped to her lapel that read, "HOA President." I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "Can I help you?" "Nathan Drake," she said crisply, not waiting for confirmation. "I'm Vanessa Hartley, president of the Riverside Heights Homeowners Association. I assume you received our legal notification this morning." I received something, I said carefully, though I'm confused about several things, starting with when exactly I joined this HOA. Her smile tightened into something that wasn't quite friendly. Your participation isn't optional, Mr. Drake. The HOA governs this entire subdivision. It's part of your property deed. Funny, I said, keeping my voice level. I've read my deed thoroughly. There's no mention of any homeowners association. She pulled a folder from her portfolio and opened it with practiced efficiency, showing me what appeared to be a professionally printed plat map with colored sections. This area, she said, pointing to a section that included my property, is designated common space. Your rose garden is planted on HOA land, not your personal property. Your cameras are monitoring community areas without permission, and your front door color violates our architectural standards. I looked at the map. It was convincing, I'd give her that. But the property lines didn't quite match what I remembered from my survey. The boundaries seemed to have shifted slightly, just enough to make my landscaping appear to encroach on supposed common areas. I'd like to see the original documents, I said, the ones filed with the county. Her expression hardened. That's what our attorney is for, Mr. Drake. If you have questions about the legal standing of this association, you can take them up in court. But I strongly advise you to cooperate. We have the authority to place liens on non-compliant properties. We can force sales if necessary. There it was, the threat wrapped in bureaucratic language. Not a suggestion, not a request. A threat. After Vanessa left, I called my neighbor, Patricia Montgomery, who'd lived 3 houses down for 18 years. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. Patricia, have you ever heard of a Riverside Heights Homeowners Association? There was a long pause. HOA, no, sweetie, why do you ask? I explained the lawsuit, the demands, the threats. Another pause, longer this time. Oh no, she said quietly. They came to me about 2 months ago, said I owed back fees for landscaping services I never requested. They had official-looking documents, legal letterhead. I was so scared they'd put a lien on my house that I paid them $900. My stomach dropped. You paid them. I know it sounds foolish now, but Nathan, they were so convincing. They had paperwork, photographs, everything looked legitimate. I'm 72 years old, living on a fixed income. I couldn't afford to fight them in court. After we hung up, I sat in my office staring at the lawsuit. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't some administrative mix-up. Someone had created a fake homeowners association, forged documents, and was systematically extorting money from people in my neighborhood. And they'd made the mistake of targeting someone who documents everything for a living. I spent the rest of the day going through my security camera footage. I had 4 cameras positioned around my property: front door, driveway, backyard, and side yard, all recording in high definition with audio. If Vanessa or anyone associated with this fake HOA came back, I'd have everything documented. The next morning, I received another letter. This time it wasn't certified, just dropped in my mailbox. A second notice of violation, printed on letterhead that looked official enough to fool most people. It listed additional infractions I'd supposedly committed: parking my work van in my driveway without commercial vehicle approval, maintaining a garden shed that exceeded height restrictions, and failing to attend mandatory monthly HOA meetings. The letter concluded with a final warning. Failure to comply within 14 days will result in escalated enforcement action, including daily fines of $100 and immediate lien filing. I photographed the letter from multiple angles, documenting the envelope, the postmark, everything. Then I called an attorney whose billboard I'd seen on my way to a client meeting last month. The sign had read, "Real Estate Disputes, We Fight for Homeowners." It seemed appropriate. Mitchell Park's law office was in a converted house downtown, all hardwood floors and framed diplomas. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with sharp eyes that suggested he'd heard every story twice. He took the lawsuit and the follow-up letter, reading through them with the casual efficiency of someone who dealt with this kind of thing regularly. "Interesting," he said after several minutes. "Not good interesting, just interesting." "That's not encouraging," I said. He looked up with a slight smile. "Actually, it might be. Let me check something." He pulled out his laptop and started typing, clicking through what appeared to be a legal database. "Riverside Heights Homeowners Association," he muttered, scrolling through results. More clicking, more scrolling. Then he looked at me. "There's no HOA registered with the county clerk under that name. No corporate filing, no tax identification number, nothing." Validation washed over me. So they're lying. They're either lying or they're operating under a fundamental misunderstanding of how property law works, Mitchell said. He pulled out my deed and spread it across his desk alongside the lawsuit. "Your property lines are clearly defined here. According to county records, there's no common area, no easement, no shared space anywhere near your lot. You own your parcel outright." Mitchell outlined my options over the next hour. I could file a motion to dismiss the lawsuit, which would likely succeed given the lack of any legitimate HOA registration. Or I could go on the offensive, file a harassment countersuit, demand proof of their legal standing, and force them to either produce documents they didn't have or admit they had no authority. I chose the offensive strategy. If Vanessa Hartley wanted a fight, she'd get one. But this time, she'd be fighting someone who had evidence she never saw coming. Mitchell prepared a formal demand letter requiring the HOA to produce proof of registration, bylaws, board meeting minutes, and financial records within 10 days. If they couldn't provide these documents, we'd move for sanctions and file criminal fraud charges. It was a chess move. Force them to admit they had no legal standing or produce forged documents we could use against them. The letter went out via certified mail on a Wednesday. By Friday afternoon, things escalated. I was in my studio editing photographs when my security system sent an alert. 3 people had just walked onto my property. I pulled up the live feed and watched as Vanessa Hartley, accompanied by 2 people I didn't recognize, planted a metal sign in my front lawn. The sign read, "HOA property, no trespassing," in bold red letters. They didn't knock. They didn't ask permission. They just hammered the sign into my lawn like they owned the place. I grabbed my professional camera with the telephoto lens and started shooting through my studio window. High resolution, perfect focus. I captured every face, every movement, every fraudulent action they took. The man with Vanessa was middle-aged, wearing khakis and a polo shirt, carrying a clipboard. The woman was about the same age, dressed in business casual, taking photographs with her phone. Then I switched to my security feed and made sure the audio was recording. It was. "If he doesn't comply, we'll take this public," Vanessa was saying, her voice clear through my external microphones. "Post about him on social media. Paint him as the neighbor from hell who refuses to follow community standards. People respond to social pressure." The man nodded, making notes on his clipboard. "What about the others, Montgomery and Fisher?" "Same approach," Vanessa replied. "Document everything. Build a case. If they won't pay voluntarily, we'll force them through legal intimidation. Most people cave when they think they might lose their homes." I recorded for another 8 minutes until they finished their performance and left. Then I downloaded everything to multiple encrypted drives and cloud storage. In my profession, backup redundancy is survival. I had proof of trespassing, proof of vandalism, proof of conspiracy to commit fraud, and their own voices on tape admitting their strategy. That evening, I did something I rarely did. I knocked on every door within 3 blocks of my house. Not to complain, not to gossip, but to gather information. I needed to know how many people had been targeted and how long this had been going on. Patricia was first, of course. She'd already told me about her $900 payment, but when I asked if she'd kept any documentation, her face lit up. I kept everything, she said, disappearing into her home office. She returned with a folder containing letters, fake invoices, and even a receipt showing her payment to something called RH Community Services LLC. I photographed everything with her permission. Next was Gerald Fisher, a retired school teacher who lived 2 streets over. He opened his door looking exhausted. "If you're here about that HOA nonsense," he said before I could speak, "I've been dealing with them for 3 months. They're claiming I owe $2,000 in back fees for services I never authorized." "Did you pay them?" "Not yet. My daughter's a paralegal. She told me something didn't smell right, so I've been stalling, but they keep sending threatening letters." I explained what I'd discovered: the lack of registration, the fraudulent claims, the evidence I'd been gathering. Gerald's exhaustion transformed into anger. "Those absolute criminals," he said quietly. "They're preying on people who are scared and don't know their rights." By the end of the evening, I'd spoken with 11 households. 7 had received threatening letters. 3 had actually paid money ranging from $600 to $1,500. All of them had kept documentation, and all of them were willing to join a collective legal action. I called Mitchell Park that night and explained what I'd found. He was quiet for a long moment. "Nathan, this isn't just a civil matter anymore. If they're systematically defrauding multiple households, that's organized criminal fraud. We need to involve law enforcement." "How do we do that?" "I have a contact at the district attorney's office, someone who handles white-collar crime. Let me make some calls. In the meantime, keep documenting everything. And Nathan, be careful. People who run this kind of operation don't like it when their victims start comparing notes." His warning proved prophetic. The next morning, I woke to find my mailbox destroyed, not just knocked over but completely smashed, the post bent and the box crumpled. My security cameras had captured it all. 2 men, faces partially obscured by hoodies, had used a baseball bat at 3 in the morning. They'd looked directly at the camera before swinging, like they wanted me to know it was deliberate. I filed a police report, added the footage to my evidence folder, and installed 2 additional cameras with better night vision. If they wanted to escalate, I'd make sure every escalation was documented. Mitchell called that afternoon. I spoke with Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Morales. She's interested, very interested. She wants to meet with you and review everything you've gathered. "When?" "Tomorrow, 10 in the morning. And Nathan, bring everyone who's been affected. She wants to see the scope of this." The district attorney's office was in a modern building downtown, all glass and steel. Rebecca Morales met us in a conference room that could seat 20 people. She was probably in her late 30s, with the kind of sharp focus that came from years of prosecuting criminals who thought they were smarter than everyone else. I brought 8 neighbors, all carrying folders of documentation. Patricia, Gerald, and 6 others who'd been targeted by the fake HOA. Mitchell sat beside me, his own briefcase full of legal analysis. Rebecca listened as each person told their story. Patricia's $900, Gerald's $2,000 demand. The Robinsons, a young couple with twin toddlers who'd paid $1,200 out of fear they'd lose their home. Margaret Sutton, an elderly widow who'd paid $800 on a fixed income. After everyone had spoken, Rebecca spread out all the documentation across the conference table. Letters, receipts, fake bylaws, fraudulent invoices. She studied everything with methodical precision. "This is systematic fraud," she said finally. "Multiple victims, repeated patterns, sophisticated forgeries. This isn't some neighbor dispute. This is organized crime." She looked at me. "Mr. Drake, you mentioned you have video evidence." I pulled out my laptop and played the footage of Vanessa and her accomplices planting the sign on my lawn. I played the audio of them discussing their intimidation strategy. Rebecca's expression didn't change, but I saw her jaw tighten. "That's conspiracy to commit fraud, possibly extortion," She made notes on a legal pad. I want to open a full investigation. That means subpoenas for financial records, background checks on everyone involved, forensic analysis of documents. But I need your cooperation, all of you. Everyone nodded. Good. I'm also going to contact the county clerk's office and the property records department. If they've filed false documents with the county, that's forgery and fraud against a government entity. That carries serious penalties. She looked directly at me. Mr. Drake, you're the catalyst here. You're the one who started pushing back. That makes you a target. I want you to be very careful. Install more security if you need to. Vary your routines. These people have already destroyed your mailbox. They might escalate further. I understand, I said. Rebecca assigned an investigator to the case, Detective Randall Cross, a veteran of the fraud division who'd spent 20 years tracking down white-collar criminals. He was waiting outside the conference room when we finished, a compact man in his 50s with gray hair and intelligent eyes. "Mr. Drake," he said, shaking my hand firmly, "I've already started background checks on Vanessa Hartley and the two people in your video footage. Should have preliminary results by tomorrow." The results came faster than expected. Detective Cross called me that evening. "Nathan, I need you to sit down for this." I said. Vanessa Hartley isn't who she claims to be. Her real name is Vanessa Hart. She's a former real estate agent who lost her license 5 years ago for fraudulent property valuations. She's been arrested twice for financial crimes, once for check fraud, once for identity theft. Both cases were pleaded down to probation. My stomach tightened, and the other two. Marcus Donnelly and Lisa Brennan. They're married, using false names. They have prior convictions for running an investment scam that defrauded elderly victims of $40,000. They served suspended sentences 3 years ago. So they're professional criminals. Career criminals, Detective Cross corrected. And here's what really concerns me. I found evidence that this same group operated under different names in 2 other counties over the past 3 years. Same scam, fake HOA, threatening letters, fraudulent fees. They collected money and disappeared before anyone could organize a response. How much did they steal? Rough estimate, over $100,000 across 3 counties. They've been doing this for years, Nathan. You're not their first victims, but you might be the ones who finally stop them. Investigation moved quickly after that. Detective Cross obtained search warrants for Vanessa's home, Marcus and Lisa's residence, and the P.O. box where they'd been collecting payments. What they found was damning. Vanessa's apartment contained a home office dedicated entirely to the fraud. File cabinets full of forged HOA bylaws for different neighborhoods, templates for threatening letters, lists of target properties with notes about estimated home values and owner demographics, a laptop with spreadsheets tracking payments received and future targets. They even found drafts of fake legal complaints, ready to be filed against anyone who pushed back too hard. Marcus and Lisa's house yielded similar evidence, plus something more disturbing, surveillance photographs of several homeowners in our neighborhood, including me. They'd been watching us, documenting our routines, looking for vulnerabilities. The district attorney moved fast. Rebecca Morales filed criminal charges against all 3, multiple counts of fraud, forgery, extortion, conspiracy, and filing false documents with a government entity. The charges carried potential sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years each. The arraignment was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Mitchell advised me that I didn't need to attend, but I wanted to be there. Patricia, Gerald, and 4 other neighbors came too. We wanted to look these people in the eye when they faced consequences for what they'd done. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, more functional than dramatic. Vanessa, Marcus, and Lisa sat at the defense table in orange jumpsuits, their hands cuffed. They looked smaller somehow, diminished without their props and costumes of authority. The judge, A stern woman in her 60s named Judge Carolyn Patterson read the charges in a flat, dispassionate voice. Multiple counts of fraud, forgery, extortion, filing false instruments. How do the defendants plead? Their public defenders stood. Not guilty, Your Honor. Of course they did, but everyone in that courtroom knew the truth. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the documents, the financial records, it all painted an undeniable picture of deliberate, systematic fraud. The bail hearing was more interesting. Rebecca Morales argued that all three defendants were flight risks with no ties to the community and a history of running similar scams in other jurisdictions. These individuals are sophisticated criminals who have spent years perfecting this operation, she said. They've already fled from previous schemes when law enforcement got close. If released, they'll disappear before trial. The judge agreed. Bail was set at $250,000 each, far more than any of them could afford. They'd remain in custody until trial. As they were led away, Vanessa looked directly at me. Not with anger or hatred, but with something closer to disbelief, like she couldn't comprehend how this had happened, how her perfectly executed scam had unraveled so completely. I held her gaze until she looked away. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. Word had spread about the fake HOA scam, and local news stations wanted interviews. I kept my statement simple. These people preyed on homeowners who were scared and vulnerable. They used fear and intimidation to steal money from people who'd worked their entire lives to own their homes. Today, they learned that justice isn't optional. It's demanded. Trial happened 4 months later. By then, Detective Cross's investigation had uncovered the full scope of the operation. Vanessa, Marcus, and Lisa had run this same scam in 5 different counties over 6 years, targeting more than 60 households and stealing over $200,000. The trial lasted 8 days. Rebecca Morales methodically presented evidence, recordings, documents, testimony from victims across multiple jurisdictions. The defense tried to argue that it was all a misunderstanding, that they genuinely believed they were operating a legitimate community organization. The jury didn't buy it. They deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Vanessa received 12 years in federal prison plus full restitution to all victims. Marcus and Lisa each received 7 years. All 3 were permanently barred from operating any homeowners association or community organization in the state. The restitution process took months, but eventually every victim received their money back. Patricia got her $900. Gerald was compensated for the stress and legal fees. The Robinsons, Margaret Sutton, everyone who'd paid these criminals got their money returned. But the impact went beyond financial restitution. The county clerk's office implemented new verification procedures for any organization claiming HOA authority. The state legislature passed a law requiring all homeowners associations to register with a central database and undergo annual audits. What had started as one neighborhood fighting back had changed the system. 6 months after sentencing, our neighborhood held a gathering in Patricia's backyard. 15 households showed up, everyone who'd been targeted, plus others who'd heard about what happened and wanted to show support. We grilled burgers, the kids played in the yard, and for the first time in almost a year, the atmosphere felt light and easy. Gerald raised a glass of lemonade. To Nathan, who wouldn't back down when it mattered most. Everyone raised their glasses, but I shook my head. Not to me, to all of us. They thought we'd stay silent. They thought we'd be too scared or too isolated to fight back. But we stood together. That's what beat them. Patricia squeezed my shoulder. You started it, though. You were the first one who said no. Maybe that was true. But what I'd learned through all of this was that individual courage meant nothing without collective action. One person pushing back was brave. 15 households standing together was unstoppable. Later that evening, as people were leaving, I walked around my property looking at the roses I'd planted, the cameras I'd installed, the burgundy front door I'd painted. All the things Vanessa had claimed were violations. All the things that were mine on my land, my home. My phone buzzed with a message from Mitchell. Just got word. The state bar is considering using your case as a teaching example for property law courses. You've literally changed how they teach this stuff. I smiled and typed back. Good. Maybe the next person who gets a threatening letter from a fake HOA will know exactly what to do. I walked back inside my home that no one could threaten or take away, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not the fragile peace that comes from avoiding conflict, but the solid, earned peace that comes from standing up when it matters and winning. Vanessa Hartley had wanted $50,000 and my property. Instead, she got 12 years in prison and a permanent place in legal textbooks as an example of what happens when criminals underestimate ordinary people. Sometimes justice isn't fast, but when it finally arrives, it's absolutely worth the fight.